I love the idea of Inktober because I love how it challenges artists to use a medium that maybe they're not comfortable with or maybe they don't use so often, but it challenges you to do it every day if you can. Unfortunately, I am always just a little bit too busy to do it every single day of October, and this year was no exception. Um, but for this drawing, I decided to go into it uh, completely in ink, so I didn't do any undersketching. I only really had like half of an idea when I went into it, so I went in just with ink, and every line was permanent. But I think it's a good exercise for artists to do this because it helps you deal with your mistakes, and you go in knowing that it's not going to be perfect. Because how can it be perfect unless you're, a genius, a genius in the permanent ink? Um, but yeah, it's good because you can deal with your mistakes and you find ways to deal with problems if you are faced with them because you can't erase and you can't go back. And you just have to go with it and make it work. So I went ahead and I did everything permanently. And obviously, you'll see some mistakes like here with the character's hair. I drew the entire circle for her head, so there was no space for her hair to go without going over the lines. And if I had drawn an under sketch, I wouldn't have drawn that line. But you gotta deal with it, and it's freeing to not have to worry about your mistakes. Because once you know you're gonna make mistakes and you can accept that, you're gonna get past it, and you're gonna keep going. I think it's a really good idea to not just in a drawing with no undersketch, but in any figure drawing at all, to mark where your character's feet are going to be placed before you finish the whole figure, because that way you can ground them and you know where their body begins and ends. Like as you could see in the beginning of the video, I also kind of, after I did her head, I marked where her hands would be, and that way I kind of boxed her in just to make sure she wasn't going crazy all over the page, and I knew where her body would fit on the page, and it helps, with proportions as well. I did have a reference image for this, as I usually do with my sketches, but it still helps to mark down the feet and other points of the body before you keep going, because that way you know where they stand, literally. I think where I do the most of drawing over lines in this piece is when I decide to do the character's clothes, because I hadn't decided until I had already drawn the figure how I wanted the clothes to look. So I ended up drawing everything right over the lines. But you know what? It's fine. I did make up for some of it in the ink work because, as you can see, there's like a lot of lines drawn over the feet, and I made a really dark ink wash for the boots, which is what she will end up wearing. So I decided I could get rid of some of those lines up there. My first thought for this drawing, honestly, when I was going into it, I thought she was going to be a witch and I was going to have like a spooky Halloween twist on this piece, but I ended up not feeling it halfway through. So I just used a character that I created in back in college when I did a children's book class, and she was the main character of this book. She was like from a tribe up in some a snowy land, and she was a young child in this book, and she was the protagonist, and she had to go to this mystical water fountain to bring back water to her village because they were going through some kind of dirty, polluted water, and she needed to be the chosen one and bring clean water back to their village. So I brought her back, and I made her grown up in this Inktober piece. It was good to see her again. I hadn't seen her in a long time. So as I go in with the final lines here, I'm going to finish up the boots, and after that I'm going to use this ink from my black Higgins bottle that I haven't used since college, and I'm using just a dirty old watercolor brush that I had lying around because, again, I haven't really had a use for ink, so I didn't bother buying any ink brushes. So I just used whatever I had on hand. And I'm going to go in and make her boots really dark to cover up the lines that I had, because I had a lot of lines on her feet because I didn't know what size that I wanted feet to be for a while. So I just kind of drew over and over. And I think they ended up looking pretty decent, and I think I covered them to a decent extent. Because apparently decent is the word that I am going to use for this entire piece. But in actuality, I do like how it turned out. I didn't really know the values that I wanted for her clothes. Kind of like how I went in initially with like a half-formed idea of how I wanted the figure to look. I also didn't really know the values of her clothes. I'm trying to think of the clothes that I drew her in the storybook, and I think I remember them because I used to draw them so much to get the design down. So I'm trying to just go back and get the values of that while I'm thinking of them. I'm just trying to make sure they're not all too dark or all too light, because that would be a problem contrast wise, because nothing would pop if everything was the same value. But everything is looking pretty all right as far as ink work goes. I know right now it looks like the top poncho and the skirt are looking a little bit too close in value, so I'm gonna go back in later and make the skirt a little bit darker to kind of differentiate them a little bit. And I think the one thing that I would do again, if I could do it again, is make her arms, or keep the arms as light as they are now, because you'll see later after I go in and give her gloves that I forgot to give her, and fix up her boots and socks again, I'm going to make her arms very dark, kind of like she's wearing a short sleeve or a long sleeve shirt. And I think the value that they ends up being looks a little bit too close to the poncho, so I wish I would have gone back and just made that different, so it wouldn't look like they're two of the same thing. But as I finish up here, I would definitely recommend Inktober to everybody else if they haven't done it already. I know I've only done it like once this year, but I've been very busy. But I really like the idea, and I hope next year I can do many more days of Inktober, because it's always fun whenever I do get the chance to do them. And as also working, you know, without an understudy or undersketch, I think is also a really good idea, because once you get past the idea that you're going to make mistakes and you accept it, it's a lot more freeing, and you get to expand on your creativity a whole lot more. And yeah, so I'm pretty much done here, and I'll show you the final image as I finish up. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I put up new videos every week. I also have a Facebook page, Instagram, all that kind of good stuff. I'll see you next week. Bye!